In this video, we're going to talk about house rules and how it is integral into building a gaming community. Okay. What's up, Wargamers? This is Doug from 2+Tough, and we are diving into a subject that is kind of a step away from the actual playing of the game, either AOS or 40k, and talk about something that is kind of near and dear to my heart, which is house rules. So what I find really helpful is to, first of all, define house rule, because it's kind of used interchangeably with a lot of different things. And so my kind of current running definition here is kind of a mutual understanding about a rule or situation that you collectively as a group agree upon. Important to know that this is not just game format. A few examples of this would be like, when is a die so cocked that we have to re-roll it? Point levels, what's your general game size that you play? Do you follow ITC formats? Do you not? Do you do more narrative stuff? Do you do open war cards, matched play? Do you have any made up rules for creating narrative situations? Those kinds of things. Anything that your group generally does or agrees upon or kind of sets as a standard is realistically a house rule. Keep in mind, when I say made up rules, I don't necessarily mean like creating abstract narrative things of like, theoretical monsters off the field shooting fireballs, all this kind of cool stuff that you can do. What I more mean is a lot of AOS players steal the pile-in rules from 40k, where if you are within 1 inch of a guy who's within an inch of an enemy, they can attack. This kind of cuts out the minute measuring of each individual guy. If you say to yourself, well, I know that the skeleton warrior is on a 25mm base, which means the guy behind him should do it, but because of the way he's holding his spear, it's not, just skip it and just do the 1 inch within 1 inch type thing. Again, that's just an example. And while it's easy to look at house rules and kind of look down upon them because the second you go to a tournament or something like that, your house rules are not in effect, the fact of the matter is house rules are what build communities. The whole reason they exist is because they increase mutual enjoyment of the game. Now, on a practical level, these house rules also speed up games by saying you don't have to move every single model. I can assume if it's kind of like a jumbled mess mosh pit in the center like I often get to with my Marauders, my opponent will be like, we're just going to assume that we shimmy in and maybe we'll get other 2 guys in. It speeds up the game because they are okay with that. Heck, even just before the game starts, deciding on what you play. I know for my group, which I'll get to in detail a little bit, I know what kind of games I usually play, I know what point level I usually play, and so I can plan on those things so when I show up to game night, I'm ready to roll. So it speeds up games, it builds communities, and it gives good experiences. So for example, what are some of my local community's house rules? Generally, we play about 1K games. Usually 2K games go a little too long for us. We also all collect various armies, so having 1K armies is much more manageable for all of our hobby ADD. We really love doing open war cards, but with match play list building rules. This allows us to create a fun storyline environment that we don't really know how to build or expect for, at the same time have a relatively balanced kind of game. Other quick ones are, say, that we roll for all the terrain stuff that it says to do in the actual rule book, like you roll to see how many pieces of terrain are in each section, as well as its special effects, its mysterious effects or whatever. And we also don't count drop dice when we're rolling. If you're rolling and one falls out before you're ready, don't count that. Now, moving away from kind of the mechanics of the game, house rules are also something a little bit more abstract. For example, in our group, we really value the fact that our opponents are taking time out of our day. And so a house rule might be, if your list is kind of kicking teeth a little too hard, purposefully try to make it easier for your opponent. Now, I'm not saying play worse. I'm saying mix up your lists and try different things. For example, I find myself being that guy who brings the killer list when at a 1,000 point game, I bring my Tzeentch demons and my Laura Chain just barfs out mortal wounds left and right. So that's why I painted up the Herald on foot. I'm going to bring him and a Gaunt Summoner just to try and mix things up. No one guilt tripped me, no one made me feel bad about it, but I, as a player in this community, have taken it upon myself to give my opponents a better experience. And really, that's what house rules are. They are a community of people saying, how can my opponents and my friends in this community have the most amount of fun? Now, here's the one thing I want to make very, very clear as I talk about this. This is not about toning down competitiveness. That's our group. We love narrative stuff. If you are part of a group that values competitive stuff, you do the ITC packets, you want to be competitive, then the best thing you can do for your community is to bring the best thing, to demonstrate to people, hey, these are the kinds of top tier lists you're going to face at LVO or something. So it is very relative to each group, but I think the principle of caring for your opponent really, really holds true no matter what scenario you're playing in. To put on my competitive hat just for a quick second, if I were in a competitive group, what I would really focus on is bringing lists that they're likely going to see at competitive events. After every game, having a discussion about, hey, here's how you could have stopped this. I got lucky here, here, and here. Here's how you could have mitigated those things. The house rule in that situation is educate your opponent on what's going on, how to play the game. Because at that point, you can be competitive as long as it's a learning experience. So hopefully you see what I'm saying, where it's not about being fluffy like we kind of are at our local group, or being competitive. It's about having a system in place for community building, communication, talking about the kind of games you want to play beforehand, getting the most out of each one of them, and just experiencing life with one another. But it must be mentioned here that if you leave your group and go to an event, a tournament somewhere in town, or a major convention, your house rules stay with your group. What I've noticed is that people bring their house rules with them. Again, those minor things like when is a die too cocked to count, or dropping it when you're rolling, or having a discussion with your opponent about ways you could have improved. Those are all things that are unique to groups. So when you get into a situation where someone doesn't want to share that information, is kind of being a miser when it comes to dice rolls, those kinds of things, rules lawyering in some groups, it's valued. We love having Brent, who's really great at keeping track of the rules. In some communities, that's really frowned upon, but you can see how when all these people collide with different values, things can get really ugly. So if you take the stance that your house rules don't go with you, you'll be much better off. Now, it's not about their tournaments not having house rules. They all kind of do. The thing is that they're supposed to write their rules out in a player packet. The packet should tell you everything about how they're going to handle rules disputes, how to do those kinds of things, player etiquette, what's acceptable, what's not. All those things should be clearly defined, and if they're not, you should really ask your tournament organizer for them. So folks, I'd love to hear about your house rules. I'm actually very interested in this topic, so I'd love for you to click subscribe, leave in the comments down below. I'm going to be monitoring this quite a bit because I always want to try new things. Like I said, we do 1K games, open war cards, match play rules, and just have a lot of fun. So I'd love to hear what you guys do. As always, thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming. Hey friends, I hope you enjoyed that video, and I want to introduce you to some awesome folks. These are my patrons over on Patreon, and they make this show possible by their direct support of me to buy battle tomes and black library books and all the material I need and the hardware support that I need to make this stuff possible. And if you'd like to join them, go ahead and click over to the Patreon page, to the link in the description down below, and you'll be introduced to a really awesome community of people talking about the hobby, sharing what they're painting. I invite them to be part of polls to decide what content comes next. I raffle off every battle tome that I review, and we're having some great fun and discussions over there. So go ahead and check it out. Now, if you can't support in that way, that's completely fine. I'm just so glad that you watched this video here today. And if you have an Age of Sigmar lore question, go ahead and click subscribe and leave it in the comments down below. I read every single question and comment. I respond to as many as I possibly can, but I use them all as inspiration for future videos. So go ahead and do that now. And I look forward to seeing you guys on my next Age of Sigmar lore video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.